my fellow Americans.
I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party that's under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers who are driven by cowardly wokeness, who divide us by racializing every issue and stoking anti-white racism, who actively work to undermine our God-given freedoms that are enshrined in our Constitution, who are hostile to people of faith and spirituality, who demonize the police but protect criminals at the expense of law-abiding Americans, who believe in open borders, who weaponize the national security state to go after their political opponents, and above all, who are dragging us ever closer to nuclear war. Now, I believe in a government that's of the people, by the people, and for the people. Unfortunately, today's Democratic Party does not. Instead, it stands for a government that is of, by, and for the powerful elite. Now, I'm calling on my fellow common sense, independent-minded Democrats to join me in leaving the Democratic Party. If you can no longer stomach the direction that the so-called woke Democratic Party ideologues are taking our country, then I invite you to join me.
The Vietnam War and the push for US involvement was a result of the Gulf of Tonkin incident. A lie. The Iraq War famously is a result of lies. Wars in Somalia are a result of lies. The Second World War and the German invasion of Poland was a result of carefully constructed lies. That is war by media. Let us ask ourselves, of the complicit media, which is the majority of the mainstream press, what is the average death count attributed to each journalist?
me ask you a question. Do you think you should be the one to be able to decide when to pull the trigger?
No, sir.
Isn't that what this is about? If you adopt the position that any time you are denied, your particular, there's 4 groups out there and inspectors, you're the group you headed, anytime you are denied, that ipso facto requires the United States and the Security Council to act on what they said they would do, which is to use whatever means necessary to take on Saddam Hussein so you can get into that particular facility. Is that not correct? Is that not your position?
Mr. Senator, I have a job to do, or I had a job to do, and that was to disarm Iraq in accordance with the provisions of relevant resolutions.
With all due respect, I'm not trying to be confrontational. I'm trying to get this as clear as I can. I really mean this now. You have an absolute logic. You put together a very tight syllogism here. You have indicated that your job is to disarm. The only way you can disarm is to have access. The only way you can have access is either with permission on the part of Iraq, or if denied, forced access, right?
Compelled access.
Compelled. Well, okay, compelled. You sound like the lawyer and I sound like the military guy. I mean, compelled, where I come from, when my old man said you're compelled, it meant I was forced. I mean, it was a real simple proposition. It wasn't much to debate. Now, there is a clear logic to that. And that's what I mean when I say I respect your position. But that means that whenever you choose a target that warrants inspection and you are denied, that ipso facto, at that moment, the only way your position can be satisfied or sustained is if the UN Security Council or the United States, acting unilaterally, uses force to guarantee access. Is not that true?
Yes, sir.
Now, that means that you get to choose the time and place when we would use force, if we use force.
No, sir.
Of course you do. If you choose the site and it's denied.
And we coordinate with the member states to include the United States.
Exactly.
And prior to us going in, we have their agreement that this indeed is an inspection worth doing.
Okay, inspection worth doing, everybody's agreed it's worth doing, and it gets stopped.
Yes, sir.
At that moment, we're an automatic pilot as far as you're concerned. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, I respect that. But now, it seems to me the Secretary of State might have a slightly different problem. Secretary of State might be sitting there and saying, now look over there on that side. Now, I remember so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and the 12 people on this side, they're all the ones that said they didn't want to use force. Now, I'm going to have to go tell the President now that we should, or Secretary Cohen, unleash whatever it takes to get it done. And our military assessment is the same as the Major's. The Major's assessment is, privately held but publicly acknowledged later, that airstrikes alone aren't going to do this. Saddam's not going to cave on this. So, now here's the deal. I recommended the President have at it and let the chips fall where they may. A reasonable position for the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State to take. But I respectfully suggest, Major, I respectfully suggest they have a responsibility slightly above your pay grade. Slightly above your pay grade. To decide whether or not to take the nation to war alone, or to take the nation to war partway, or to take the nation to war halfway. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't. I mean this sincerely. I'm not trying to be flip, because I think, and that's why I said at the outset, the reason why I'm glad you did what you did, we should come to our milk. We should make a decision. But in terms of whether the Secretary of State has no more to consider than you do as the arms inspector, you didn't get in, didn't get my job done, get me in. Period. You made the deal, right? That's the deal. A deal's a deal. Get me in. Scott Ritter, I'm ready to go. It's not how it works. Now, maybe it should work that way. But wouldn't you acknowledge that if you were President of the United States or the Secretary of State, you'd sit there and say, now, okay, old Scotty boy didn't get in. We said he should get in. We want him to get in. It's important that he does get in. They're not going to let him in, so what are we going to do now? We know that France and Russia aren't going to be with us. We're quite confident China's not. We've already run those traps. They're not there. We're not sure where the United States Senate is, but have at it, boys. Go get them. And by the way, Scott and the boys say air power's not enough. I think it's a legitimate debate, Scott, Major. I think it's a legitimate debate. But I don't think we should be putting it in the context of you have somebody up there at state saying, look, how can we weasel out of this agreement? We want to let this guy out there hanging. We're not this. It's a very practical political decision. Same kind of decision General Powell made. Same kind of decision President Bush made. Every president, every Secretary of State has to do it. Like I said, they get paid more than you. Their job's a hell of a lot more complicated than yours. They may have made the wrong decision, and you brought it to light. We should address it. We should say straight up where we are, and we should do it. And for that, I thank you. But it's above your pay grade.
Rationality belongs to the cool observers, but because of the stupidity of the average man, he follows not reason but faith, and the naive faith of the proletarian requires necessary illusion and emotionally potent oversimplifications, which have to be provided by myth-makers to keep the ordinary person on the right course.
That I'm allowed to ask you this question is because today the federal court ruled that the government doesn't have the right to determine who is or is not a journalist. This is the second election in a row that the court had to overturn your government. Do you still insist on being able to make that decision, and why?
First of all, questions around accreditation were handled by the press gallery and the consortium of networks who have strong perspectives on quality journalism and the important information that is shared with Canadians. The reality is organizations like yours that continue to spread misinformation and disinformation on the science around vaccines, around how we're going to actually get through this pandemic and be there for each other and keep our kids safe. is part of why we're seeing such unfortunate anger and lack of understanding of basic science. And quite frankly, I won't call it a media organization, your group of individuals need to take accountability for some of the polarization that we're seeing in this country. And I think Canadians are cluing into the fact that there is a really important decision we take about the kind of country we want to see. And I salute all extraordinary, hardworking journalists that put science and facts at the heart of what they do and ask me tough questions every day, but make sure that they are educating and informing Canadians from a broad range of perspectives, which is the last thing that you guys do.
Killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate...
You killed 1 million people in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the brass neck to be sitting here now urging another Iraq war.
George,
after
if
what
I
you've
was
already
still in
done.
Parliament...
There can be no doubt that Saddam Hussein has biological weapons and the capability to rapidly produce more, many more. And he has the ability to dispense these lethal poisons and diseases in ways that can cause massive death and destruction. If biological weapons seem too terrible to contemplate, chemical weapons are equally chilling. UNMOVIC already laid out much of this, and it is documented for all of us to read in UNSCOM's 1999 report on the subject. If we consider just one category of missing weaponry, 6,500 bombs from the Iran-Iraq war, UNMOVIC says the amount of chemical agent in them would be in the order of 1,000 tons. These quantities of chemical weapons are now unaccounted for. Dr. Blick says, quipped that, quote, mustard gas is not marmalade. You are supposed to know what you did with it. We believe Saddam Hussein knows what he did with it, and he has not come clean with the international community. We have evidence these weapons existed. What we don't have is evidence from Iraq that they have been destroyed or where they are. That is what we are still waiting for.
Dr. Fauci, knowing that it is a crime to lie to Congress, do you wish to retract your statement of May 11th where you claimed that the NIH never funded gain-of-function research in Wuhan?
Senator Paul, I have never lied before the Congress, and I do not retract that statement. This paper that you are referring to was judged by qualified staff up and down the chain as not being gain of function. Let me finish.
You take an animal virus and you increase its transmissibility to humans. Right. You're saying that's not gain of function?
Yeah, that is correct. And Senator Paul, you do not know what you are talking about, quite frankly. And I want to say that officially. You do not know what you are talking about. Okay, you get one person.
Let's read from the NIH definition of gain of function. This is your definition that you guys wrote. It says that scientific research that increases the transmissibility among animals is gain of function. They took animal viruses that only occur in animals and they increased their transmissibility to humans. How you can say that is not gain of function?
It is not.
It's a dance, and you're dancing around this because you're trying to obscure responsibility for 4 million people dying around the world from a pandemic.
And let's Dr. Fauci.
I have to, well, now you're getting into something. If the point that you are making is that the grant that was funded as a sub-award from EcoHealth to Wuhan created SARS-CoV-2. That's where you are getting. Let me finish.
We don't know.
Well, wait a minute.
It didn't come from the lab, but all the evidence is pointing that it came from the lab, and there will be responsibility for those who funded the lab, including yourself.
I totally
This committee will allow the witness to respond.
I totally resent the lie that you are now propagating, Senator, because if you look at the viruses that were used in the experiments, that were given in the annual reports, that were published in the literature, it is molecularly impossible.
No one's saying those viruses caused it.
It
no
is
one is
molecularly.
Those viruses caused the pandemic. What we're alleging is that gain-of-function research was going on in that lab, and NIH funded it.
That is
you can't
not.
Get away from it. It meets your definition, and you are obfuscating the truth.
I'm not obfuscating the truth.
Senator
You are the
Paul's
one.
time is expired, but I will allow the witness to.
Let me just finish. I want everyone to understand that if you look at those viruses, and that's judged by qualified virologists and evolutionary biologists, those viruses are molecularly impossible to result
No
in
one's saying those viruses
SARS-CoV-2.
caused the pandemic.
Senator Paul,
We're saying they are gain-of-function viruses because they were animal viruses that became more transmissible in human, and you funded it. And you admit the truth. And you implying...
Senator Paul, your time has expired, and I will allow witnesses who come before this committee to respond.
And you are implying that what we did was responsible for the deaths of individuals. I totally resent that. And if anybody is lying here, Senator, it is you.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Welcome, everybody, to Redacted. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natali Morris.
And on this show, we cover the stories the mainstream media largely ignores, except when they put their own spin on them, like the Nord Stream pipeline story, the New York Times bombshell just a few minutes ago. We'll talk about that, plus so much more on tonight's show. We're going to look at how the UK, which has been actively sort of the fulcrum for pushing for direct war with Russia, is now over the past 24 hours ramping up their need for building out their massive military, in addition to taking the war directly to Vladimir Putin. Those are the words from the UK government. So we'll look at all of those things as it relates to the Ukraine war this afternoon.
And the World Health Organization has wrapped up edits to the peace treaty, or the treaty that will give them an extraordinary amount of power. We've been talking about this. Could the next pandemic perhaps be... Any guesses?
Bill Gates probably has a good plan, I'm sure.
Yes, there is some Bill Gates mixed into this. What's the next pandemic? Because he might know. We're going to tell you. I'm just going to leave you guessing there.
Plus, we got a chance to see those January 6th videos last night on the Tucker show. Tucker got 40,000 hours of videos to go through, and they've only been managed to comb through a chunk of them. We're not going to talk about Tucker's piece directly, but we are going to look at the larger mainstream media, which is up in arms and flipping out about their coverage of the January 6 videos. So we will cover that angle and so much more as Redacted starts right now.
What's weird?
It's weird. It's like I have iced water tonight because I had too much coffee last night. I stayed up like way too late, couldn't sleep. But this tastes like there's like a lime in it or something. It's weird. Like it's just water. Like where'd the lime come? I'm like, I'm like looking around like a referee. Like there's something dripping from the ceiling or something. I don't know.
When we first got married, Clayton got into this thing to put oregano on toothbrushes, and so I went and brushed my teeth with the toothbrush. And I was like, oh, there's something on here. It might be toxic. I wonder if he's poisoning me. That's right. So I jumped to this conclusion that he wanted, because we did have life insurance policies, that he might want to kill me. I didn't poison your water, just so you know.
Okay, good. And oregano
just drink a bunch of cranberry juice.
Clean me right out. Can anyone suck the venom out of my leg? I don't know what's going on. To be fair, the oregano was your thing, because you used to have like the drops of oregano for sore throats.
I never said to put it on the toothbrushes.
But I thought it would kill, like it would clean off a toothbrush.
Yeah, it tasted so bitter. And then I was like, maybe someone else is trying to kill us both. So I literally left him a goodbye note when I went to breakfast. He's like, what's this note on the toothbrush? She was like,
she gets this from her mom.
I thought I might be dying from the toothbrush.
I love my mother-in-law, but she like literally paranoid about any kind of thing like that. And she'll like, our daughter gets it like that too now, where she's like, do you ever see people running near the beach and think, oh, there must be a tsunami?
Yeah, she does.
No, we don't ever. What? You think that just people running near a beach means tsunami? Like, what are these big leaps? Anyway, a lot of paranoia going on. Welcome in on this, what is it, Tuesday? Yeah, it's Tuesday now. And so much news happening that we're going to get to here on the big show. So thank you guys so much for subscribing and being a part of our everyday. Is everything okay on Rumble tonight? Of course, we had that big tech issue last night. Rumble had this big issue where it was only feeding audio. Now it looks like everything's good to go. Today. Good to go.
Awesome.
Because the team from Rumble said, yeah, we don't know. We're not really sure what the heck the problem was. So we should be good to go tonight on Rumble. So anyway, we're also on Rumble. We also have a daily newsletter, which you can get totally for free. You should all sign up for it. If you go to redacted.inc, just put in your email address and you will receive a welcome email from me at Clayton@redacted.inc. You have to confirm your email. Just click on the yes, verify. And then tomorrow morning over your cup of coffee, about 7 a.m. Eastern time, you'll get the newsletter first thing in the morning. And you can read it in about 5 or 10 minutes. There's Grover doing some spin moves. And we hope you enjoy it because it's a lot of fun. And again, it's a way for us to stay connected with you, and it's totally free. Redacted.inc. That's the place to go. Any other housekeeping you want to, anything else?
No.
Any other poisonings?
not been poisoning. We're not poisoning each other, just so you know. We are married, but
last night
not.
she got hit in the head with a ukulele. I had nothing to do with that. It's crazy. All right. So let's get to this. These clowns are going to get us all killed. And we're talking about these world leaders right now. And it's amazing to see these people who are in power that are literally leading us to the brink of nuclear war. The British government actively moving us towards all-out war with Russia. We're going to get to that bombshell in a moment. But first, the New York Times, not to be outdone, out with a brand new Nord Stream pipeline story today. This comes a month after legendary journalist Seymour Hersh confirmed that the United States blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. Now the New York Times has their own spin on this story. Here is the headline. And I almost spit out my coffee laughing at this story. Just remember, by the way, that the New York Times is the #1 mouthpiece of the intelligence community. That's not me saying this. That's, in fact, 25-year veteran of the FBI, John D'Souza, who worked on their anti-terrorism task force, calling the New York Times the mouthpiece of the intelligence community. If the intelligence community wants a story out there, they go the first place they go is the New York Times. So here is the headline this afternoon. Intelligence suggests pro-Ukrainian group sabotaged pipelines, U.S. officials say. New intelligence reporting amounts to the first significant known lead about who was responsible for the attack on the Nord Stream pipelines that carried gas from Russia to Europe. Oh, wait a minute. New intelligence amounts to the first significant known lead?
That's interesting.
What
Blinders much?
Like, what about Seymour Hersh's piece a month ago that the New York Times, by the way, ignored and he brought it to them and they decided not to publish it. So he published it on his Substack. So this is the New York Times. It's unbelievable. So I just want to kind of go through this because I think it's incredible. So here's the new intelligence reviewed by U.S. officials suggests that a pro-Ukrainian group carried out the attack on the Nord Stream pipelines last year, a step towards determining responsibility for an act of sabotage that has confounded investigators on both sides of the Atlantic for months. Really? Has it confounded investigators?
And also, pro-Ukrainian is a pretty wide dragnet for everybody in the West. Right. So at least we know that the Russia did it is no longer the narrative.
Right. Oh, guess Russia's out of... And the New York Times was telling us it was likely Russia, right? No, now it's a pro-Ukrainian, which is just another way of saying the United States. U.S. officials said that they had no evidence that Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine or his top lieutenants were involved in the operation, or that the perpetrators were acting at the direction of any Ukrainian government officials. Oh, okay, so then you mean it wasn't Zelensky directing this, but it's pro-Ukrainian, then where is it coming from? The brazen attack on the natural gas pipelines which link Russia to Western Europe fueled public speculation about who was to blame and they start with Moscow. From Moscow to Kyiv to London to Washington, or Kiev and London to Washington. It's now remained one of the most consequential unsolved mysteries of Russia's year-old war in Ukraine. Really? Okay.
But even making that link. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Philip. You go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so how can you have an investigation that shows, okay, we know who did this, but we don't know who did it. We know their ideology, but we don't know who did it.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
they definitely like strawberries.
Group. Yeah, how do you know? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But we don't know who it was.
We know that they're pro-Ukrainian, but we're just going to stop short of... So this is
They liked cookies and they were blue and furry.
Yeah. They wore white suits. Like, we know all that.
They wore cone hats and they were burning things. But we really can't figure out who that is. So U.S. officials said there was much they did not know about the perpetrators and their affiliations. So U.S. officials say. So if you ever needed any more evidence that the New York Times is just a mouthpiece of the intelligence community, here it is. So we're not going to go so far as to say that it was the United States and their clandestine sabotage operation that was carried out under the dark of night by the U.S. government and the CIA, we're going to just stop short of that and call them pro-Ukrainian. So that's that piece of the story. So I wanted to make sure I brought that to you. Now to Britain, pushing all-out war with Russia. In a repeat of World War I mean, you could rinse and repeat, where Britain declared war on Germany and then brought everyone else into the mix with them, from Belgium to France to Italy, etc. Now Britain is doing the exact same damn thing with Russia. So last night we heard from Tobias Ellwood, who is the head of the British Parliament's Defense Committee. Now, he's their spy master. This isn't some low-level guy. This isn't some just like random, I don't know, even low member of Parliament. No. This is the Parliament's Defense Committee head. And now calling for a direct war with Russia from the West. A head-on collision, essentially. Watch.
We are now at war in Europe. We need to move to a war footing. We are involved in that. We've mobilized our procurement processes. We're gifting equipment. We need to face Russia directly and reckon that rather than leaving Ukraine to do all the work.
Okay.
To do all the work. For what purpose for Britain?
Yeah, let's go to war with Russia directly. We need to stop all this pussyfooting around and go to war with Russia directly now.
No more foreplay.
And we knew that this was coming. And this had been long predicted. In fact, going back, I was reading pieces today from The Guardian from 2014, where they were saying the United States is going to bring UK into their war against Russia with Ukraine. Like, that's what the plan is here. And the UK and Europe will be dragged into the United States proxy war in Ukraine. Like, that's the mission here. And this all looks like part of the plan. It's all coming together.
Do you have the video of Zelensky where he's actually saying that it would be better if they struck first to send Russia a message, like NATO and them would strike first? I don't know if you saw that or if you
I did see that. Yeah. No, I don't have it tonight, but yeah. So, where he specifically says, what we should do is launch nuclear weapons. We should attack Moscow. Like, let's attack Moscow. Did I say that correctly? I think, I'm not if I'm paraphrasing.
He said it a few times in various iterations over the last 6 months.
But in the past few days, he said something. Yeah, he said it again.
He said something about deterring, like, nuclear war is not okay unless we, declare it on Russia in order to
deter Russia.
Deter them from.
Yeah. So that's how we
which makes sense.
Right. Let's attack Moscow. And use nuclear weapons to do it and wipe them out.
Yeah, a nuclear deterrent ceases to be a deterrent when you employ it.
Right.
Then it's just an attack.
Then it's just, and then everyone's annihilated, and we're all dead. Right. Like, we are on the precipice. I mean, you're seeing now what's happening in the UK, and if you just read what people in the UK are talking about, people are really concerned that their government is one step away from a major direct head-on collision with Russia. So this all looks like part of the plan. Just a few days ago, in February, Ukrainian President Zelensky went to the UK, you remember this, and to shop for new weapons, asking for jet aircraft. He went there to a standing ovation in front of Parliament. He gave away a helmet that was signed and basically asking for more jet aircraft because we have to stand up for democracy. Watch.
We know Russia will lose. And I appeal to you and the world with simple and yet most important words. Combat aircrafts for Ukraine. Wings for freedom.
So we want combat aircraft in Ukraine. Please send us these F-16s. And now the UK, also today, on the very same day that we're getting these warnings and this push for direct war with Russia, that we don't have any ammunition in the UK. Our stockpiles are low. We're dangerously low levels, and we need more. The UK's national security is now at risk, and it would take Britain at least a decade to replenish its ammunition stocks, says Parliament. According to a document compiled by the Defense Committee of the House of Commons, as the Ukraine conflict continues, quote, it's clear that the UK and its NATO allies have allowed ammunition stockpiles to dwindle to dangerously low levels. The report noted that while Russia is also facing the diminution of its stockpiles, other potential adversaries of the UK are able to increase their defense potential. So we need to ramp things up right now. And as the defense minister said, we need to be, or as the defense member of parliament said, the committee chair, we need to be on a war footing. Those were his words, a war footing. So what does a war footing actually look like? Because
we're here, I think.
Well,
this
no.
is it.
I mean, I think they think we're here, but I think when they look at the numbers, they're trying to replicate what we had in World War II or World War I. So as of 2022, the British Army comprises 79,380 regular full-time personnel and 28,000 reserve personnel. And according to Statista today, 33,000 are in the Air Force, 27,000 are in the Navy, 6,000 are in the Royal Marines. So a total of 148,000 combat-ready forces in the UK. Right now, the latest reports are, and just put this in perspective for a second, 148,000 UK members of the military ready to spring into action if they need them. And maybe that's even being generous, because how many of those, you have the reservists in that mix, how many of them are ready to go, right? 148,000. Just put in perspective, the latest reports are that more than 200,000 Ukrainian soldiers have been killed in the war. 200,000. So their army is essentially gone. That means that more Ukrainians have been killed than the entire UK army exists. So you're going to go into a war footing against Russia? Did you see what just happened? How is that going to go for you? With no real air cover in UK, hypersonic missiles could be launched in a second on your island. That's the game you want to play right now? So what does a war footing actually look like? Well, at the height of World War I and World War II, there were 4.6 million soldiers in the British military. Take a look at this chart. It's actually unbelievable. Here on the left side of your screen is World War I, slightly less than 4.6 million, and then ramped up again, dwindles down and skyrockets back up during the height of World War II. And it's been on a constant decline ever since. Now, these are in terms of thousands on your screen here. So very, very low. So a war footing means we really got to ramp things up to World War II status or Korean War, which added about 200,000 troops. What does a war footing actually look like? You're going to mobilize every young male in your country to fight against Russia?
I mean, yes, because that is, it's put Rosie the Riveter in the factories because you take all the men.
Right.
That is a war footing.
Yeah. So we convert.
It's a league of their own.
By the way, we did hear that, right? We heard them saying we need. Well, I forget who a member of the UK Defense Department a few weeks ago said specifically that we need to turn our factories into a war footing. So we get literally starting converting all normal factories of consumer production into war manufacturing.
Well, that's one of the emergency powers that President Biden already gave himself,
right?
Which is to take normal manufacturing chains of supply and prioritize them for weapons. So what might go to building homes or machinery or computers or what have you, the American government already has the power to jump the line in order to make weaponry, and they are. They've had this since last year.
Right, yeah, because remember Biden went down to, where did he go, Northrop Grumman or
yes.
something? He went down to and basically demand hey, we need more HIMARS.
Yes.
We need more, and there was some other weapon that he was asking about, memory.
It was part of a spending bill, I think.
Javelin.
It's not coming to me right now, but it is something that he's given himself within the last year.
Yeah.
And so it's totally conceivable that other governments will too.
Go ahead, David.
I'm also very curious, if they've lost that many military and there's a small amount of military left, where are they shooting all these weapons? Where are they just sitting at night shooting these bullets into the sky, just wasting them? Where all these weapons, all this stuff that we're sending them, there's no accounting for it whatsoever. And it's are they even being used by such a small military? That makes zero sense.
Right. I don't know. I mean, again, this is because now we're in this sort of modern military where you don't need as many people on the ground. But we're seeing a ground war, the first ground war in Europe since World War II. So this is a ground war. And we're seeing what's unfolding in Bakhmut right now, which, we have the Ukrainian government saying we're not going to give up on that territory and whether or not that's going to sustain and fall. We have Ukrainian soldiers today telling the press that they're about to abandon Bakhmut. So, this is a ground war. This is a grind out meat grinder, as Colonel Douglas McGregor has said on our show. And then Zero Hedge this afternoon reporting that the UK is using new backup coal reserves for the first time. So that's a first. And so many people on Twitter from the UK are saying, and so it begins. So you're using your backup coal reserves right now for the very first time as an energy crisis is unfolding. And new reports out of Germany, which we'll cover tomorrow on the show, really about Germany and their impending energy crisis, because now they're having to pull back on electricity and expecting blackouts and power shortages in Germany as a result. So then today, well, actually a few weeks ago, actually back in December, we had the Biden administration deciding whether or not they were going to allow cluster munitions, because Ukraine was asking for cluster munitions, which are controversial and they're indiscriminate and they don't just hit any one little small target.
They're technically already using them. The little butterfly things that they're dropping in the cities, they're technically already using them.
Yeah, the pedal mines. Yeah, because they're just indiscriminate. And the kids are walking up into playgrounds and getting hit by these things. So now, again, renewed interest. This is the U.S. News and World Report overnight. Exclusive. Ukraine seeks U.S. cluster bombs to adapt for drone use. So let's put these on drones now and start using them.
So it wasn't the bombing part they had an issue with. It was the delivery system.
Right. So if we can stick them on the drones that we have so many of that Mark Hamill provided us, and we can stick them on there and we can drop them.
Cool.
We can just indiscriminately bomb as many people as we want.
Okay, so I'm glad they had that ethical conundrum back in December and they worked it out now. They didn't think it was an ethical idea, but if you put it on a drone, it's more fantastical.
And then you can just gas in clusters, drop gas in clusters at the same time.
Yeah, we worked that one out. Good, glad.
Unbelievable. So that's the very latest. I mean, we have this continued war footing talk coming out of the UK, and it seems to me, this. And remember, Boris Johnson was the one who stopped the peace talks, right? So the UK has really been driving the push for a direct confrontation with Russia, perhaps even more than the United States. Although, they're working so closely together. But it seems the UK has been really, really pushing for this, maybe more than anyone else.
Yes.
And when you have peace talks that are unfolding in Turkey, and then Boris Johnson, the UK government, steps in and tells Zelensky, no, walk away from this. Absolutely not. We need war. There's no peace negotiations.
Yeah.
Don't do it. So anyway, we'll continue to watch this, and we'll continue to see what happens with this Nord Stream pipeline, the New York Times BS as well. But first, let's tell you about what's going on with the next pandemic.
All right. Well, will the next pandemic target children? The World Health Organization and Bill Gates also, they all seem to think this, or at least be signaling that would be the case. Cholera is the thing. I don't know if you guessed cholera when I gave you the chance to guess what would be the next pandemic. Cholera may be it. And Bill Gates is saying that it will affect children this time. So those two things should have your attention. The World Health Organization completed their meeting last week to discuss giving them global power to control the next pandemic, because I guess they think they did an awesome job of the last one. This is something we've been discussing at length, the CA Plus treaty. Here's them wrapping up their meetings last Friday. Yeah, we did it. It's good. We're working really hard. This is called the Intergovernmental Negotiating Body, which includes 194 countries. Now, they said, because we've been following it so closely, we've been picking apart things that we think will infringe on our liberties. They said that negotiations on the draft are going to continue over the next year. We originally had thought that they would be voting on this in May, in the spring of this year. But now they're saying they'll vote in 2024. So maybe we have more time, everybody, to push back on this. This is not a done deal yet. Here's the timeline they gave us. The next meeting will be April 3rd to 6th. And accordingly, they are on target to vote at the 77th World Health Assembly in 2024. So speak now or forever hold your peace about what you think about this. Recall when we went over the draft 2 weeks ago, here are some of the things that I expressed concern over from the actual document, is that it gives the World Health Organization the power to define the next pandemic, determine lockdowns. It gives them surveillance power. It allows them to determine treatments, mandate vaccines, control vaccine distribution, control vaccine IP and who profits from it, and also sort of redistribute everything, because they can say what constitutes an emergency and what constitutes a threat. They can call out climate change, global conflict, and illness, which in fact they are doing right now with cholera. And I'm going to show you.
Margaret Smith in our chat says Tedros, of course, who's the head of the WHO,
Yes.
could not get a handle on or control 3 cholera outbreaks in Ethiopia.
Okay,
So,
that's a fair point, because he is from Ethiopia.
Right.
And so let's talk about how they're using this language around Ethiopia. Also, one thing from the CA Plus that gave us pause in a big way was this idea of an infodemic. These are the things that were still in draft when they entered the meeting last week. Maybe they've defined them since, but we still don't know, because I have not seen their edits. We still only know that they have yet to define these terms. The most upsetting to me is the word infodemic or interpandemic. You choose which one you like or don't like here. We're just sharing. This is a safe space. Now, this was part of the draft document that they were working on in closed doors. And we know that, as we don't know exactly how far they got, but what they gave us in a press release today showed us that they have about 300 amendments to what they've got so far. It says that this is an effort to make the world safer from communicable diseases and ensuring greater equity in the global response to public health emergencies. They say governments have been working to ensure consistency and alignment across the INB and IHR process, with proposed amendments will also be presented to the World Health Assembly in 2024 and would, together with future pandemic accord, provide a comprehensive, complementary, and synergistic set of global health agreements. So they want to make rules for everybody, all countries. Already, President Biden had expressed enthusiasm for this idea last year. We have no reason to suspect that he is not all in on whatever it was that they concluded in that meeting, unless a bill passes that would prevent him from doing so, like the one introduced in the Senate last week called the No WHO Pandemic Preparedness Treaty. Without Senate Approval Act, it does have the potential to stop the president from doing this, but a bill like this died last year. So we're not hopeful, but who knows? Now, meanwhile, yes, go ahead.
Really quick, I just want to throw in there. It's like they're saying that this is so open and giving and caring and all that, but one of the main lines is protecting the IP.
Yes.
It's like that is like counter to it being open, and this is a global pandemic. We want to save the world, but we got to focus on the IP, because that's very important.
One of the things we talked about is that it requires all kinds of surveillance and tracking and reporting. But when it comes to the IP of a vaccine, it's very heavy on the word suggests. Like, pharmaceuticals should or are suggested to work together and share the IP with world governments. They don't have to at all. They're loose and fast with that language. So in the last, I would say, 2 months, we've reported on different things that the World Health Organization continues to warn us about with increasingly strong language. We talked about Marburg virus. I refer you to that piece. We've already talked about fungus, right?
Right.
And so this week it's cholera. The Telegraph reported today that the WHO is now warning that at least 30 countries have seen an outbreak of cholera. But you might think cholera is a waterborne disease that's usually preventable with clean water, and you would be right. But the WHO is saying that this is an outbreak from a polycrisis. Do you remember this word?
Yeah, so this was the World World Economic Forum. This was Klaus Schwab's new poly crisis that we are now facing. It's not just one crisis, it's going to be a poly crisis.
Which means they need the power for to control a lot of different things in order to prevent this poly crisis, which could be cholera, which is a horrifying disease. We're not minimizing cholera at all, but we reported on this word when it popped up in WEF documents on February 2nd, if you want to seek out that segment. And here is now that word being used in practice in the Telegraph today. It says cholera should be easily preventable and strikes only the most vulnerable who have no access to clean water or health care. This makes it a barometer of poverty as well as effectiveness of basic sanitation and health care, said this person. Many countries were facing a poly crisis where factors like poverty, displacement, crumbling infrastructure, natural disasters, and conflict all heighten the risk of cholera, she said. So then it goes on to tell us exactly what are the three things that it thinks are contributing to the outbreak of cholera: climate change, conflict, and COVID. So these are the three things that the World Health Organization needs power to control because of a poly crisis.
So
you see the rhetoric here, right?
I do, and what's hilarious to me is that they put climate first. Almost every, I think every one of them, not just like I think every famine, every outbreak that we have in the world is as a result of conflict, is as a result of mostly United States interceding in countries and destabilizing countries and causing a war. So almost every famine we have, whether it's, Syria to Yemen, you name it, it's because we interfere. It's conflict. It's not climate change.
Yeah.
But I love that that's their first freaking one on their list.
Even all the way back to the potato famine, a lot of those potatoes were shipped to England in Ireland, while people starved. A lot of it is supply chain issues more than actual famines. I don't know about, Bible days. That seemed like real famines. Are we not talking about that?
Well,
no.
I don't know. Yeah. Well,
7 years of famine.
Yeah. Well, yes. And then, of course, in Egypt, you definitely have when flooding of the Nile and receding. In some years, it would overflood and kill. And then sometimes you wouldn't get enough water. And then you would definitely, but no.
Okay. This is not related to, no. I've gone too far.
Yes.
This is not related to the WEF. What we're saying now, not that, of course, cholera isn't a devastating disease. It is. Everybody should have access to clean water. Period. But will it get better with more government oversight? That's what the WEF wants you to be scared and be like, oh, we better have someone on these three things: climate change, conflict, and COVID. This basically gives them access to everything so that we don't all get cholera. Here's the scary part is that we know that health officials were held back by knowledge that the pandemic did not affect children the way that it did adults. We know that we all may have behaved differently if COVID was harder on children than it was. And so we know they sort of have to mix that in the future, this idea that it's not just you this time, it's your kids, right? And then we're dealing with a different set of behaviors. I was thinking about it today because a lot of the bullshit that I swallowed around COVID, I can sort of forgive myself for listening to certain voices until I can't, right? And then some things that I have to take responsibility for cognitive dissonance,
Right, we all do, right?
Okay.
Right.
But I would have behaved a lot more hysterically if I thought that it really was going to affect the children.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I would have come around to where I am now in this sort of self-reflective stage on COVID, I might still have been all in on COVIDism if I thought that it would save my kids.
Yeah, I don't know.
So, that's a terrifying thought. It's a terrifying thought experiment that I think we all should have. We don't have to share where we get when we do it.
But they're going to play on that fear. And I think that's what we need to be aware of, right? They're going to, if it's going to target our children, they say. Right. This is what we need to be on the lookout for, because I don't think what they expected with COVID, with kids, natural immunity. Kids were resilient and fine, right? It wasn't that. It was immunocompromised 80-year-olds in a senior citizen's home.
Yeah.
Right? That's who we should have been concerned about, not, 6-year-old kids.
Well, and unfortunately now it's going to be a requirement for getting into school. They're going to have to get, the jab. And so it's like it's still affecting kids in a big way, but not the actual disease itself.
Right.
The virus
mandates, the government policies. We're still seeing it. Even forget just like elementary school. We're seeing it at colleges. Like colleges still have mandates all across. So
if you look at that and follow that, that means that all of their recommendations and things are going to be worse than what the possible thing could be in the first place. If it goes the way that this pandemic went.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're supposed to depend on them.
Right. And so, that's why a lot of the rhetoric around future pandemics, including this Bill Gates fictitious virus that he simulated with his foundation. Remember, we talked about this just last year in the fall, that the Bill Gates Foundation ran this simulation with fake news reports about a disease that could be. And, then this sort of, I'll show it to you, but it shows this like, oh my God, so scary disease. And then global leaders, and you're supposed to be scared that they may not be able to cooperate. That's the whole point of this exercise. Watch.
Officials in 2 Latin American countries alerted the WHO of several outbreaks of a new infectious disease that's mysteriously appearing across the region. Severe epidemic enterovirus respiratory syndrome 2025. Over the past 6 weeks alone, there have been 500 confirmed or suspected cases reported. The virus could cause a severe pandemic if early containment and mitigation efforts are not successful.
The pandemic in this type of situation and trend would be a risk for the global health security.
Pandemics are inherently political, financial, and so much broader.
We have not spoken on the leadership in country. And I think that we need to be also very careful. We cannot decide a lot of things without the leaders be involved and agree on that.
There is no substitute for national leadership.
It's important to support the local response or the national response.
Training those that are in these areas first, enabling them with the tools, protecting them, and if needs be, regional solidarity first.
At this stage, communication is key, and communication should include not just scientists with data, but also social, religious, and political leaders.
Trust. This is an essential issue, and trust was broken among countries, between populations and healthcare systems, between healthcare systems and governments.
I'm very sorry to say that in 2025, we need to strengthen the health system.
WHO needs to be a voice for the voiceless.
No one is safe until all of us are safe.
As of today, there have been an estimated 1 billion cases worldwide, with more than 20 million deaths, including nearly 15 million children. Countless millions are alive, but left with paralysis or brain damage. The most successful countries are those which invested in preparedness and trained for this moment years in advance. This included having full-time pandemic preparedness and response teams, which conducted detailed operational planning and routinely tested those plans through exercises and drills. If more countries had participated and heeded the guidance, the toll might have been much less.
All right, someone in the chat just said they're doomsday couple, and you better not be talking about us because I didn't make this. We didn't make this video. Bill Gates Foundation did. And yes,
and
that is a doomsday.
Right?
What was that?
That's not Event 201, right? That's not. Is that?
No.
Because Event 201 came out in 2019. That's a new one?
Yeah, that's the new one that was that they did right before Christmas.
We know what Event 201, that was like a precursor. So, I mean, that's
this
crazy.
is the
I thought that was the same.
No, this is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation conducting this pandemic tabletop exercise.
The whole point of this video is the countries that were able to work together will survive, and the ones that can't, wow, too bad that, their death toll could have been so.
You'll be brain dead, brain paralysis. You'll have brain paralysis.
And so hand over all the power for the environment, global conflict, and, pandemic preparedness. And then we're all good. Check.
And I love, Jean Meserve, who was in that video. She was a former CNN anchor. So they go right to like CNN. Who was for, who can we grab from? I don't even know if she's former. She might still even be at CNN. Like, we need somebody to lend some credibility to this story.
Yeah.
So she's the one telling us 1 billion
CNN
people have
might
died.
Actually mistakenly air this.
Right. Yeah, we got our hands on Bill Gates. Bill Gates' new tabletop exercise for the next pandemic. Here's what's going to happen, and they roll it.
Or they could just roll it as if it's real and then be like, so this, and just go with it. Because, early pandemic was good for their ratings.
And that's the thing. Like, so if you look at like the track record of things, like you look at like H1N1, the bird flu that was supposed to break out and like be a global pandemic, didn't happen. Like how many times they said Ebola is going to break out and go worldwide, didn't happen. Like monkeypox, all these things.
Swine
flu. If you look
flu.
at how many times they get this, they get this wrong so often. And it's good that they do, but imagine if they had this like massive global response every single time they thought there was going to be an outbreak.
Right.
I mean, we'll be in a constant state of lockdown.
Well, we're in a constant state of emergency, like we covered last night on the show, right? The emergency powers of President Biden, it's a permanent continuation of emergency powers. So we are and that's what they want, because it keeps them in power and it continues to fuel the machine of making money.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and it also lets them step outside of regulations and things, because it's like as long as like the pharmaceutical industry getting past the emergency use authorization, it's that kind of thing. They get extended powers that they normally wouldn't get because there's an emergency.
Yeah,
yes,
that's right.
All right. Well, don't worry though. Bill Gates has got it. World Health, check.
That's great.
We're in hands,
but not good hands.
Just hands.
You're in creepy Epstein hands with Bill Gates. All right,
we've only had dinner 35 times. Now, come on.
Only dinner on Epstein Island,
Was it 35 times?
I think it was 36 times, right? Wasn't it? Or am I wrong? I think that was
35, 36, but
yeah. I mean, to fly to his island that amount of times, like, no.
I think of like my 3 best friends in San Francisco. As adults, I have not seen them 36 times since we graduated high school.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Any friend that I flew with on a plane 36 times, I think I would know pretty damn well what they were into.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a lot of time. That's a lot of dinners. Even if you have like a friends club that you get together every so often, for like, I don't know, like a games night or something like that, or a pub night, a pub crawl, or a, pub trivia or something like that.
I don't think they were doing pub trivia.
Like once every 4 months, 3 months, Anyway, take you
What
years.
is the first name of the ghost of Ravenclaw, Clayton? Ding, ding, ding. That's what they were doing.
I don't know. Nearless, headless Nick? No.
It's Rowena.
All right, we've got more news to get to. We're going to talk about these January 6th videos and 40,000 hours that you weren't allowed to see. And we're getting some more information about that side. But it's really the media side of like their response to the coverage of it that we want to talk about. And we're also going to talk about the COVID cover-up and why the whole Wuhan lab thing might be just a big distraction trying to lead you astray. We're going to do that story. It'll be a little bit later. We're going to do that on Rumble, though, tonight exclusively, because there are things we're going to talk about that we absolutely cannot talk about on YouTube. So you make sure that you subscribe to us on Rumble as well. The stream will continue over there a little bit later on Rumble. But first, it's no secret. If you're tuned in, then experts are saying we could already be in a deep recession, specifically among the poor and the middle class. And we'll see how the rich fare and what happens on Wall Street as all of these layoffs continue, because they are continuing right now. And we also just saw new reports today of India and China moving further away from the U.S. dollar. So the continued collapse of the U.S. hegemony is upon us. And that's why it's so important to make sure you don't have your family's finances and future and retirement tied to a currency of a government, whether it's the euro or U.S. dollars. Every government currency in world history has collapsed. All of them. Why would the U.S. dollar be the first one that doesn't? The answer is it won't. So what has sustained for 4,000 or 5,000 years has been gold and silver, precious metals, as a hedge against famines and wars and everything else. And our friends at Lear Capital can help you get set up with a gold or silver IRA. It means that you control it. It's like checkbook control of your IRA, where you can invest in precious metals right inside of a self-directed account, and it can grow then tax-free. So at retirement age, you can pull it out and not have to pay taxes on that profit or the increases in that. It's brilliant. That's a self-directed IRA. And is it traditional or Roth? I always forget, I'm confused. The one that grows tax-free that you get.
Roth does. Roth,
okay. So it's a Roth. So you can set it up either way. So you can call Lear Capital today at 1-800-613-3557 or go to LearRedacted.com. Right now, and here they're giving this away right now for the next month, I believe. If you buy 1 ounce of gold, they're giving you a free ounce of silver, which is incredible. Literally free silver that can help you. You can keep it or sell it immediately, whatever you want to do. But you buy 1 ounce of gold, and then they'll give you 1 ounce of silver for free. So call Lear Capital today, 1-800-613-3557, or go to LearRedacted.com. Get your free gold and silver investor's guide and get that free silver when you buy 1 ounce of gold. So our thanks to Lear for supporting the show.
All right. Well, here's a question for you around riots, protests. I'm really torn on these words tonight. So
insurrections.
Let's work it out together.
Okay.
But does the media have a favorite extremist group to dump on and a favorite extremist group to protect? It would seem that is the case. More specifically, does the media favor maybe Antifa against QAnon, or white supremacist or alt-right, or whatever they label these extremist groups? Yes, they do. We can see that with a tale of 2 riots or protests, depending on your perspective. Here are the 2 events that I'm going to discuss right now. Is the January 6th events from 2021 and a violent riot that happened this weekend in downtown Atlanta, 2023. And I'm struggling with this word because one, I think, was a riot. Another does not seem like a riot. One was definitely a riot and not a protest. So I'm going to call them events because I don't want to influence your conclusion. Okay. January 6th versus March 4th. These are the 2 events. So let's start with January 6th. You may be tired of this by this time, but new news has come out of the January 6th, which is new video from the event in Washington, D.C. that muddies the claim that January 6th was an insurrection. This comes from Monday's episode of Tucker Carlson Tonight, where they received over 40,000 hours of video footage that Carlson and his staff were given by House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Here is Carlson's summary.
Turns out there's quite a bit of video you haven't seen. And that video tells a very different story about what happened on January 6th. More than 40,000 hours of surveillance footage from in and around the Capitol have been withheld from the public. And once you see the video, you'll understand why. Taken as a whole, the video record does not support the claim that January 6th was an insurrection. In fact, it demolishes that claim. And that's exactly why the Democratic Party and its allies in the media prevented you from seeing it.
Okay. Now, one of the more shocking revelations is around the shirtless, horn-wearing man named Jason Jacob.
The shaman.
Yes, Jacob Chansley.
And I was just asking, I wanted to make sure we cut out, because YouTube will flag it and block it if we were showing people getting beat with tear gas.
There's none of that. There's none of that.
Okay, just be clear.
That's kind of the point, is that we were already given all of that by the January 6th committee.
It was run on a loop. It was run on a constant loop on CNN and MSNBC of the tear, whatever. I know it was tear gassing or not, but it was the people smashing windows.
Yes.
Like the people,
now, I have not done a content analysis of all 40,000 hours, but according to the Tucker Carlson show, there is more nonviolence than there is violence. He admits there's some ne'er-do-wells who smash some windows, but there's far more sort of civilized behavior. Again, we're going to get back to the QAnon shaman, Jacob Chansley. Here is a picture from him. Incidentally, I took this from Rolling Stone today, and the file name for the image that, leave it up for a second, that Rolling Stone magazine gives this is Visual Language of Hate.
That's how the Rolling Stone labeled it?
The file name when I downloaded it. It's like, all right, I see where you're going. They think that he's a hateful person, that everything on him symbolizes hate. Now, I'm not familiar with the whatever's around his nipple, if that's a
it looks
signet
like the tree
of peace.
is that the tree of life on his? I mean, no, I don't want to keep staring at the guy's
Yggdrasil?
nipple. Yeah, I don't know.
It does look like it.
Yeah, like the tree of life. Okay.
I don't know. I'm the wrong person to analyze these images, but according to Rolling Stone, all of them are a anthropomorphized vision of hate. Okay. Now, we've all seen images of him, though, video of him sort of chest thumping and yelling. And his, this footage, though, shows the opposite, him calmly walking around as if he is a guest of Capitol Police, as if they are not at all surprised by him, and they are sort of escorting him like you might a guest to a guest bathroom. Watch.
And at the center of it, the single most famous person arrested that day was a Navy veteran from Arizona called Jacob Chansley, often referred to as the QAnon shaman.
The so-called QAnon shaman. QAnon shaman.
Someone named Q Shaman.
Jacob Chansley became the face of January 6th, a dangerous conspiracy theorist dressed in outlandish costume who led the violent insurrection to overthrow American democracy. For these crimes, Chansley was sentenced to nearly 4 years in prison, far more time than many violent criminals now receive. What did Jacob Chansley do to receive this punishment? To this day, there is dispute over how Chansley got into the Capitol building. But according to our review of the internal surveillance video, it is very clear what happened once he got inside. Virtually every moment of his time inside the Capitol was caught on tape. The tapes show that Capitol Police never stopped Jacob Chansley. They helped him. They acted as his tour guides. Here's video of Chansley in the Senate chamber. Capitol Police officers take him to multiple entrances and even try to open locked doors for him. We counted at least 9 officers who were within touching distance of unarmed Jacob Chansley. Not one of them even tried to slow him down. Chansley understood that Capitol Police were his allies. Video shows him giving thanks for them in a prayer on the floor of the Senate. Watch.
Thank you, Heavenly Father, for giving the inspiration needed to these police officers to allow us in this building.
Okay.
To allow us in the building and escort us around. Here's this entrance here. Here's.
Now, a lot of them are kind of on their phone when he walks by, like, horn dude.
Yeah. Oh, there's a horn guy walking by.
Cool.
When you remember, like, back
not
when
the
this
body
first
language
happened,
I would expect.
Go ahead.
I pointed out to you, Clayton, it's getting darker here. I pointed out to you, Clayton, that it was like we were watching Time magazine photographer type photos coming out of there. It's like these were look like more photo ops than anything, because they had like professional shallow depth of field photos, like it was taken for Time magazine cover. And like that's almost what it looks like. He was on a tour and they were taking him into his little photo ops.
Yeah, and the police were taking selfies. There's plenty of footage now emerging where the police officers are taking selfies with people. People are taking selfies with the police officers. They're taking photos of each other back and forth in this footage. Now,
one of my favorite YouTubers, Viva Frey, and also he's a lawyer. Viva Frey, is that how you think you say it? I don't know. He pointed this out on Twitter. Here are the charges that the Justice Department brought against Jacob Chansley. This video does not track with that. Obstruction of an official proceeding, maybe because this was a day to certify the election, entering and remaining in a restricted building, disorderly and disruptive conduct in a restricted building, violent entry. When did that happen? And disorderly conduct in a Capitol building, parading, demonstrating, or picketing in a Capitol building. So I'm not sure.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, like, when did they like quickly escort all of the senators and congressmen people out like it was like this bad thing then for this person to just walk around? You know what I mean? Like they said that they had to like rush them all out underground and all the other stuff for that.
Yeah.
Like, that makes no sense. That kills that narrative.
Right. It doesn't make sense. Now, we don't get timestamps, and it would be nice if we had them, but we don't have interns going through it.
And remember, this is sort of the first tranche of these videos. Like the first they've had, I think he's had them now for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, the 40,000 hours. So they probably zeroed in on certain topics, and they're going to continue to release different aspects of this.
Right. So, do these charges hold up or not? I don't know.
4 years in prison?
Yeah, I'm not committed to a narrative that he is a crazy weirdo or a peaceful anything. I just want to know the truth. I'm not saying either side, but this to me does not make him look like whatever crazy that this montage of the right really, or the left really globbed onto as this, what did we call him? Visual language of hate.
According to Rolling Stone.
According to Rolling Stone. CNN, though, is working overtime to protect their narrative of, QAnon shaman as a radical insurgent. But they don't specifically address the conundrum of this footage. Here's the headline they published today. You would think they would be like, oh, we need to air this too. We need to go through this too. We got to get on this, find something that they didn't find. That's normally how it works in the news. When someone breaks a story, the other media outlets try and break it more. That's supposed to be how it works, not discredit them who has broken it. And we continue to see this. This is a brand new phase of journalism, right? Where someone breaks a story, the other media outlets find it uncomfortable, so they shit on it rather than, sorry I said that word, but instead of go and try and, but when we were in the news business, if someone broke a story, we'd be like, we better go dig up more then, have more on it.
Well, yeah, I mean, look at Watergate, for crying out loud, right? Once the Washington Post ran their particular pieces of the story, the New York Times did everything it could to also confirm and corroborate it and add to the story, right? Take it further.
Yeah.
And the same thing is true with countless other stories. But for whatever reason, the New York Post breaks a story about Hunter Biden's laptop, and then everyone else craps on it and buries it now.
Right.
Like that's
instead of reporting it themselves or trying to. I don't understand this because.
Or Seymour Hersh. There's another example, right? Seymour Hersh does the story, and the New York Times ignores it, and everyone else ignores it. Doesn't even cover the story.
Now, in this, what to know about this footage, that article that I just showed you from Tucker Carlson, they don't address why there's this conundrum. Like a general reaction would be, hey, we told you this guy was the Tasmanian devil. This footage doesn't show that. We'll report it too and get back to you. Instead, what they're doing is trying to put a hit piece on Tucker Carlson's show. And also, here's this next piece they did today, and a hit piece on Kevin McCarthy for giving it to him.
Tucker Carlson, with the help from Kevin McCarthy, reads the headline, tries to sanitize the very real violence of the January 6th attack.
So they're not addressing the inconsistencies. They're just not going to.
Well, and they could not have, Kevin McCarthy could not have given it to a more polarizing figure for the left. It's like, that's their punching bag is Tucker Carlson.
Right.
And so he kind of had to have known that, but he's also got the biggest audience. So it makes sense to me. And I feel like he's doing a great job of going through it, but it's just like the whole narrative. That's something that I wanted to see from the beginning, because I was told there was 14,000 hours, not 44,000 hours. That's a huge, like you're going to be able to see after they go through this footage, the narrative that they created out of the limited footage that they let us see, and the narrative that is actually there. And I'm really actually excited to see where it goes.
It's easy to do. Social scientists are trained to do what's called a content analysis. Is you just mark down how much is it if it's violent, how much of it is breaking things, how much of it is peaceful. It's easy to do a simple percentage.
Right. Yeah, you'll be able to do that pretty quickly, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, not quickly,
and then make it publicly available, and then we can all see it.
This should be a part of the National Archives. Like, why were we kept from seeing this during the January 6th hearings?
Right.
Right?
Remember, Clayton, I just want to point one more thing out. Remember, Clayton, when we first started covering this event, there was a video where somebody was handing sticks out of the basement of the Capitol. So, I'm wondering if that will resurface again, because you remember we talked about what was that?
And the doors being open. Remember, we saw the gates being removed and letting people in, but then that video suddenly got scrubbed. We couldn't find it anymore.
Yes.
It was like you couldn't find it anymore.
It's hard to find now. You can barely find it on Rumble. You have to really search for it.
Yeah. Now, again, the moniker around this is the January 6th riots, right? Should we use that word? And what about those inconsistencies from people who, had the most to gain from the popularity of calling it a riot? Liz Cheney, AOC, Nancy Pelosi. Nothing from them out of why there was this sort of peaceful trot around the person that you told us was, leading an insurrection. Okay, so that concludes our discussion of January 6th for now. Inconsistencies, yet media total domination around white supremacist, alt-right, QAnon. Can you think of any other extremist groups they're pinning this on?
No.
All far right.
Proud Boys.
Far right extremists.
Yep. Yeah.
Right? Is the narrative. They're all far right extremists. That's what they want us to
AKA
think.
feds.
Now, let's move on to the March 4th. Here is that footage.
This is the Cop City site. Construction vehicles are up in flames. It's like a trailer for the construction crew, about to be up in flames. Smoke bombs. Cops just seem to watch.
Okay, and here's another tiny little clip. Sorry. Okay, what you're seeing there are at least 35 people who were arrested for their participation in a violent riot in downtown Atlanta on Saturday, and at least 23 of them were charged with domestic terrorism. Here's the mugshot that the city of Atlanta released. The group was attacking a police training facility that was under construction. So they blew up the construction site. And then when police tried to stop them, they aimed their fireworks and other projectiles at the police. The group is affiliated with Stop Cop City. So that's what they're calling this police training center, is Cop City. So they've called themselves something that is called Stop Cop City. Not so easy to say. It is an Antifa movement. One of the participants is a lawyer with the Southern Poverty Law Center, which has long since said that Antifa is not a domestic terrorist group. The media lets them get away with this. Up until now, the statement by the Atlanta police and Governor Brian Kemp, they don't call this group far extremist. They call them, the governor calls them radical, but they don't use the word Antifa. The local Fox station calls them protesters. So we're allowed to call them protesters, but we're not supposed to say that January 6th participants were protesters. They were rioters. Okay. They didn't, I didn't see equipment being bombed on fire.
Right.
I haven't seen that. Well, I didn't see people aiming fireworks at police. Now, there is this, sort of. No, I'm not going to go there. But now the New York Post, let me just point this out, is actually saying that Antifa is responsible for this and that Antifa should, in fact, be labeled an extremist hate group. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say in May of 2020, there was also a riot in Washington where the security shack on the White House lawn got lit on fire. And most people don't even know this even happened. I think it was May 30th or somewhere in there that it happened. It was a George Floyd thing. And they were lighting things and threatened to light a church on fire that was right by the White House. That was never even covered by the mainstream media that I ever saw.
Yes. Now, in Andy Ngo's book, Unmasked.
Here, by the way, sorry. I just wanted to pull up what David's talking about. The White House, when they burned that guard shack, firefighters in D.C. responded to numerous blazes set intentionally by protesters in the city Sunday evening as protests over the death of George Floyd. So these were attacks on the White House guard shack and a church nearby as well, and near the AFL-CIO's headquarters. So there's what David was just referring to.
And do you remember ever hearing anything about that?
No. The Hill covering it because it's right in Washington. No one reads the Hill.
Yeah. Actually, that is in his book. I just sort of searched my notes. So, he dictates, it's sort of a participant observation and a journalistic report of Antifa. And he talks about how a lot of these events are a lot like this. The media sort of apologizes for it. A lot of times they get arrested and released, or not arrested at all. Or, as in the case of CHOP, which was the occupation in Portland, the police said, we're not even going in there. And, he went there, got his butt handed to him, had to go to the hospital, had hemorrhagic bleeding. And the police said, if you go in there, we can't, we're not going to go after you. Because for some reason, the media does not really want to report on Antifa as an extremist group. Because they sort of espouse the values that the media likes, but in a more extreme way, such as environmentalists, gender equality, racial equality, only they are radicalized and they actually train for combat. In this book, he talks time and time again about how, they just sort of are given a pass, that the extreme right is absolutely not. Here's what he says about both sides. I'm just going to read my highlights from the book. In fact, misconceptions, he says, misinformation and disinformation abound about Antifa in both the left-wing and right-wing media. On the right, they're portrayed as street hooligans, violent, but also weak, gender-confused, soy boys and girls. On the left, they're characterized as brave heroes who defend their communities against white supremacists and fascists, but neither side capture what they truly are, or the true threat they pose to the American Republic and a liberal democracy. If you're asking, what is this? What does it even mean? He does give a history of how Antifa comes from Europe, Germany specifically, and how it's short for anti-fascism or anti-fascists. He says, simply put, it's an ideology and movement of radical pan-leftist politics whose adherents are mainly militant anarchists, communists, or collective anarchists. Smaller factions of them are socialists who organize through political groups like the Democratic Socialists of America and others. Although he does say, he details time and again how it's not really all that organized. Even when there's like mass gatherings, what they're yelling about is usually different things. There'll be someone there like chanting Black Lives Matter and another person there chanting, about gender equality and TERFs, and another person chanting for something else, and all they stand for collectively is against fascism. And so, thankfully no one was injured at this weekend's riot, but it was one of the more public and visible events from this extremist group. And it points out how the media wants one thing out of one group and nothing out of another, right? I think these are two really important juxtapositions. And they don't care
and it
to
carries over to social.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I was even people who are gender critical got booted off of Medium all the time, but extremists, if they're extremist on the left, can use Medium. I was thinking about this recently. I'm like, what is this?
The publishing platform. Medium.
Yeah, the publishing platform.
Well, like someone says in our chat, what's cooking says in our chat here, why aren't their bank accounts frozen like the Canadian truckers' bank accounts were frozen? Right? They get a lot of the Chaz or Chap, the Occupy Portland. Right. They had so much pizza, they had to turn it away because people were giving so much donations. So the GoFundMe accounts, the PayPals, and all those things that were shut down for the Canadian truckers. They are not extremists. They are well-intentioned. It's like they don't want to call out extremism for fear of throwing the baby out with the ideological bathwater. Right. But you can do that if the bathwater, is tinted with the right, I suppose. With equality and gender equity. Yes. Yeah. I mean, extremists, they glob onto an idea. They're passionate about it. Maybe it is absolutely well-intentioned at first, and they obsess over it to a point that they think that there's no other option than to tear down the fabric of society because what they're obsessed with is so unacceptable to them. Right. And that is true of both sides. And I have empathy for that. You can absolutely get passionate about something. And this is something I think about a lot because Michael Schellenberger's research shows that people who are dissatisfied with their government are more prone to be violent. And so, we point out a lot of holes in the governments we have in modern society, but I would never want to cause somebody so much stress in their life that they
would cross that line. And so I take responsibility for how we, cover things, because I don't want someone to feel so powerless that like tearing it all down around them seems like the only option for anybody, for no matter the ideology.
Chaz was Seattle, not Portland. Anon Emas says Portland had the siege on the federal courthouse.
Okay,
That's
thank
right,
you.
yeah.
I'm getting my events mixed up. There were several. So again, this is extremism, and you can really hate racism so much that you need to throw a concrete milkshake at somebody, which is one of the things that they train with, is like you make a real milkshake with like milkshake ingredients and put quick concrete in it so that when it hits someone's face, it's like,
jeez,
you're going to start drying into concrete. Like a lot of things like this, or pool noodles filled with nails. This is from his book taken by the Portland Police Office after an Antifa event. This is for like swinging around, but also popping tires. So that concludes my tale of two ideologies, two events, two narratives. They're obviously not the same, but when we hold the media to account for how they cover them, it is absolutely unacceptable to have it out for one group and then give the other group a pass when maybe there's something more kind and empathetic we can do to both to talk them down.
Right. And when you're looking at all of this coverage too, 40,000 hours in the media, it just discredits what Tucker Carlson's doing with this footage. They're just, I think in many ways, they're just jealous. But it's also amazing to see their response, CNN's response to this. Like, here's what you should know. Like, we're going to tell you what you should know about Tucker Carlson's footage of the January 6th.
We don't actually want our viewers to know the truth. We want you to know what Fox News is doing.
Right.
Yeah.
This is their agenda. Don't look past, look past our agenda.
Right.
We tell you the news.
Right.
CNN.
It's almost like they're like, should we have wanted this a long time ago? No, we got it from Liz Cheney. We're good.
Yeah.
We didn't.
Yeah, we got it from AOC, so we know what really happened. AOC really thought her life was over that night.
Yeah.
From a different building. So fascinating. Let us know your thoughts on that in the chat below. For our next story, we are going to head over to Rumble because we're going to cover the COVID cover-up story, and we're going to deep dive some data around these PCR tests and a whole bunch of other things that we're going to be looking at. That I think the Wuhan lab story, the lab leak story, has been a total distraction from the real story. So we're going to talk about that over on Rumble. So rumble.com/redacted is the place to come where our stream will continue. Rumble.com/redacted. So come on over. The water is warm. All of you folks on YouTube, we got to say goodbye, unfortunately, because we will not be allowed to talk about some of these things specifically on YouTube. They will block us, ban us, and it's still a violation of their terms of service. So come on over to Rumble right now, rumble.com/redacted.